I'm joined as ever by Anne Laure Jackson, and we thought it would be fun to do something just a little bit different. Hello, Anne.
Hello, good to see you. I'm really looking forward to this.
Yes. So last week, Anne says, what we could do, I could ask you questions, Andy, and see what you know. So we answered listener questions last week. So this week, you get to have Anne asking me questions with, of course, the danger of most people say they never know where my brain is going next. So it could be fun. So if you do have any questions, by the way, let's set this at the start. You can send questions to Anne through us here at Pure. Just email us, hello@pure247radio.org, hello@pure247radio.org, and I'll put those questions to Anne. But today, it'll be Anne asking me. So do you want to start?
I do. And this is almost like this should be a listener quiz at the same time. It's like, okay, you're going to be the face of it, Andy, and then we'll see what everybody else would come up with themselves. Okay, so let's start. Totally unprepared and unrehearsed. What are the 7? Can you name them? Just give us the names to begin with. The 7/8 senses that I would deal with when we look at sensory processing and integration. There are many different types of ways of looking at senses, but what are the names of the main 7/8 that I work with?
Right. The 5 that we would recognise would be, it's right. So sight, smell, taste, hearing, and touch. Those are the 5 we're probably more familiar with. And then there's the vestibular system.
Well done.
Which is to do with movement. And then there's a 7th, which I can't remember.
Can I give you clues?
Yes, please give me a clue. What's the 7th one?
I'm kind of like doing moving actions for those who are listening rather than watching at the moment. I'm kind of like my body is jigging and having a bit of a dance, but my head is still.
Motor something.
It is a motor something. It's proprioception.
That was the one. Thank you.
So it's your proprioceptors that are in. Well, no, I'm not going to tell you because I'm going to ask you where they are next. Okay, so that's proprioception. And what about that 8th?
So there's an 8th, which is actually a group of a collection of senses. At that point, I get completely lost, and I sort of listen and go, "That's really cool that you know that. I don't."
Okay. This one is called interoception. And a little bit of the clue for the next question is that intero meaning internal. So internal sensations, interoception. And that's a group of senses. So which leads on to the next question is, where are they located? Where are the main sensory receptors in the body for each of those?
What I do remember is that smell is different to the other senses, because it goes directly to the brain. That bit I do remember, I think. Is that right?
It goes directly to the limbic system, yeah. It doesn't go through the brainstem and through the thalamus,
okay,
which are core areas for the processing of the sensory integration. So yes, smell goes directly into the limbic system and doesn't go through the main centres to get balanced out or tweaked in any way. It affects us immediately. Yep. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to think that the vestibular system should be something to do with the ears, because I always associate ears with the ability to stand up and not fall over, which is why when we get the cold or the flu, we can struggle to walk in a straight line because our ears are all messed up.
Brilliant. Yeah. So we've got 2 parts of the ear. There's the middle, and then there's the inner ear. And it's the inner ear. Once you've gone past all the sound bits, obviously we're talking about auditory. I think most people would know that obviously our hearing is based in our ears. So you go through the hearing bit and then you hit the vestibular bit. And actually, yeah, just the strongest bone in the body, I'm not sure if I said this before, the strongest bone in the body is the one right behind your ear, because there is so much to protect. It's really important, both for hearing and for our vestibular system. And that's technically the strongest bone in the body.
I didn't know that. That's cool. So that's what that it's just like a thicker bone or a stronger bone, and that's around the ear.
It's thicker. It's much more protective. That you can kind of feel, if you were to feel it yourself, there's a bump behind your actual ear.
Okay, got that.
And because the rest of the scalp is quite flat, and then you get to just behind your ear, and there's you can feel a bump, and
Yeah, I've
that's
got a
the
bump.
strongest part. You got a
Yeah,
bump.
I
If
have a little
anybody
bump.
doesn't have a bump, then protect yourselves. But you should have a bump behind your ear.
I have matching bumps, one on each side. That would be a different concern, wouldn't it? So
you can go to your wife, eh? I have matching bump.
on the back of my head, right? So we're talking about location of where the senses kind of feed in.
Yes.
After that, I can't remember. The ear is an obvious one because we knew somebody who had a problem. I can't remember the name of the condition, but they would just fall over. And that was to do with the problem with the inner ear. It wasn't like a cold. It was nothing like that. And they would just find themselves the inability to stand up because it was messing with the inner ear. I think, is it surgery they had to have in the end? It wasn't like a cold. It was much more kind of serious than that in a sense. But yeah, it messed with it badly. So they would feel dizzy when they were sitting down and they'd fall over and it was terrible.
Yeah, it's really hard because you've got these little calcium carbonate crystals on the inside in your inner ear. And if they get dislodged in any way, then that really messes up your vestibular system. That's not my area. I work when everything's kind of like should be working properly, and the mechanics should be working properly. It's just the processing getting between the receptors and the brain. That's where the problem is. But yeah, it's really hard for those. And that's, well, in a way, it's good because you can have people can twist and turn you and operate and do all kinds of things to your vestibular system to help.
Meniere's disease. That was it. Meniere's. Pretty sure. Yes. Beyond that, I don't remember where the senses kind of feed in. I just remembered the whole ear thing was kind of important.
Okay. Well, kind of trust, taste, smell, vision, all the rest of those. So proprioception, though, where are those receptors, do you reckon?
You see, I want to say the heart, but that's probably not correct, or somewhere near the heart. But that's probably completely wrong.
If I go back to my little dance, which was, if I keep my head still, it's very hard to keep your head still. The rest of my body is moving. And this is a really important key sense for body awareness, for coordination.
Is it? It's a motor thing. So then is it the brain somehow?
It will connect. The receptors are in the joints and the muscles. So
Are you glad that it's Anne that answers the questions and not me?
This is why we thought we'd do this and just see where this took us. It's a lovely way of being able to say, okay, yeah, no, we don't know that. So, let me tell you. So muscles and joints, it's crucial to know where our body is and how to move it so that we can coordinate it. When we can't see, we can't smell, we can't taste where our body is, we are totally reliant on their information coming from muscles and joints, and that's our proprioceptors. So that the last one, interoception, it's not quite a trick question, but it's kind of like, yeah, so interoception, because that's our group of senses. So what do you reckon?
I want to say nervous system because it's controlling all sorts of things that are going on inside the body. So my brain then says, well, that's got to be the nervous system that's got so much to do with this.
Correct. It is the nervous system.
Hey,
it ends. The nervous system is the kind of thing which take the messages. The ends of the nervous system are based in your heart. This one would be in your heart because it's those.
I knew there was something in the heart.
You've got your internal organs, internal receptors, your stomach, so that you know whether you're full or whether you're not full. Your bladder, so that you know whether you need to go or whether you don't. Your bowels, your heart rate, and that's where we know that the beating heart. Just lots of sensations internally, or receptors on the insides of our body that tell us those internal body functionings. And then we have to interpret what those actual sensations are for it to make sense to our brain. And that's where we get the problem there, get the processing issues.
I have a question to put back at you. How did they work out? I was just chatting to a marine biologist the other day, and she was talking about squids and bacteria, and it just got me thinking about things. How did we discover, or who discovered, or what did they do, that us feeling full in our stomach is connected into our sensory system. How did they work that out, as opposed to we think there's just a little thing that flaps up and down and that's it, full like a normal fuel tank? How did they get to that?
I know, it's fascinating when you actually start digging underneath and thinking, crumbs. There's an awful lot of what we do is hypothesizing. So we know the neuroscience, and it's mainly through people who have died, to be honest, to have a look at what their bodies are doing on the inside. There's an awful lot of research done on the body that's left. Our spirits have gone, our body's left, but we know that they had certain symptoms, they had certain signs, they had a problem with this, that, and the other. So when they go and actually dissect, they can see what nerve pathways, maybe there's a bit of, they can have a look and see what's going on. Are there any physical differences? Now, thankfully, we have MRI scans and other ways, so we don't need to wait for people to die. And then we can actually see that the brain active and living. And the more actual brain imaging we can get and body imaging, the more information we're going to get to know about all of this. So what I'm saying about the hypothesis is that we know a certain amount about the nervous system and where it is and where it goes. And we hypothesize that there's an issue because of behaviors that we see. So we see behaviors, and this is why you will often get different interpretations, because somebody will see a behavior. They think, somebody thinks that child is naughty because perhaps they've come from a more psychological training. Or others, if they've come from more psychiatry, they might think, okay, well, we've got a slightly different mental health issue here rather than an emotional issue. If you're coming from, I observe those like naughty behaviors, for want of a better word, and I see, what is it in the senses that's causing that to happen? So we all look at the same behavior. It just depends on our knowledge base as to the hypothesis, as to what it is we assume, we think is going on with that person, according to our own training and knowledge base that we have. So some of it is clear, really clear neuroscience, and you can model, you can watch, you can see what goes on in the body, and the rest of it is hypothesizing and putting two and two together.
Cool. Okay. Ask away some more sensory questions, and I bet people are now very, very relieved that it's the other way around most weeks. Okay. So one thing, it'd be interesting if we went through our 7/8 senses, what might be out of kilter? Now, I don't need you to go through the whole lot, but just give an example. If someone's tactile system, if someone's touch system isn't processing or isn't very integrated, is there kind of like one thing that might look like, or they might struggle in one area because their touch system isn't that happy? They could have an issue with something like close-fitting clothing, could feel really claustrophobic, as opposed to, I've got a pair of socks on there on my feet, I don't think about them. They could feel those socks and it would make it very uncomfortable. They want to take their socks off. Putting things over their head, like a jumper, for example, might make them really uncomfortable, because now they can feel the movement of the fabric across their hair. It's moving their hair, the eyelids. It'll start to really magnify the sensation that they feel, which would make them very, very uncomfortable.
That's really good. 10 out of 10, sir. Right, next one. That's the tactile system. Smell.
Yes. It could be strong smells. So, for example, if this was an example we had, if somebody has had sickness and they associate a smell of broccoli with being sick, they're then going to have an issue with broccoli, because now they're remembering, well, if I have broccoli, I'm going to be sick, which may not be the case, but all of a sudden the sense is so strong, it's kind of overprinted on their brain what it is they think is going on. So they then misassociate, I'm going to vomit if I have broccoli. So then you need to desensitize over time so they can actually get to eat broccoli because it's really good for you.
Yes. I'm going to put a side question in. We might have to come back to this another but is I have to ask you, is sensory health, you're talking about physical health, in knowing that broccoli is good for you.
Yeah.
When we're talking about sensory health, is it always good for you in the moment, or is it later that you'd get the effects?
I don't understand the question.
All right, I don't understand the question. Okay. What I was getting at was that I was thinking about it, and I was going for a swim this morning and thinking that sensory health is really nice in the moment. physical health, we do things because we know it's good for us, but we might not enjoy the experience. Anything that is feeding into our sensory health is good at the time. Not everything is good for us in for other reasons, but from a sensory perspective, if it is feeding and nurturing our bodies, then it is going to feel good. So yeah, slight digression there. Okay, back to the senses. So we've done tactile, we've done smell, visual. How might someone have a problem with the visual system?
The obvious one that comes to mind is light aversion. Would be a very classic one for me to think of, that you would struggle with the light. So you prefer darker rooms. If it gets too bright, that brightness of light could be too much for your senses, and you have an overload of, I can't cope with this brightness. Something we can all probably associate with if we're particularly tired or been using a computer for a longer period of time, or we've been in a very bright environment. Actually, our natural instinct would be to close our eyes or have a little nap or try and cover it or wear a hat. If it's a sunny day, how often do we put a hat on or shades to try and minimize the sun coming in? So I would look at the senses of an eye. Actually, it's probably akin to having a problem with being in the Sahara Desert without shades, but you're in a darkened room because it's just you can't process the light.
Super.
Yay.
Proprioception. Are you enjoying this?
Yes and no.
Proprioception. Let's see if you remember what it is again and where it is, and therefore what problems, or one thing that it might impact.
Proprioception. Where was that again? Oh no. Muscles and tendons and all that, joints.
Yeah.
So last week's example that you shared about putting a button, top collar button on a shirt. If you've got issue with your proprioception systems, then you might struggle to know what your finger and thumbs are doing. And when you're doing your button and you can't see, or you look in a mirror and now it's reversed, all of a sudden you can't process what's going on because you can't feel, you can't work out what's going on because you don't have you can't interpret the touch correctly of your finger, thumb, the shirt, the button, or perhaps you just can't work out where to put your hands while you're doing it.
That's so good. Good. Right. Interoception.
It does go in.
Yeah, it does. I know. It's just like you're not just here, like, I was going to say, you're not just a pretty face. It's just like, it's lovely. You're actually receiving, not just these interesting conversations. It's really lovely. Interoception.
Right. Heart. That's the internal ones, isn't it? So you might struggle. What's one? You might struggle to know if you need the loo. So if you've had an illness, perhaps bladder infection is where I would think of. You associate pain with going to the loo. So then you think, I need the loo, but I don't want to go. So you don't drink. And that sort of magnifies a problem because it's now confused because you're thinking, well, if I don't drink, I don't wee, therefore it doesn't hurt. But actually the solution would be to drink more and actually dilute everything to make it go better. So I would say something like a bladder infection would mess with our knowledge of what we're supposed to do. And all of a sudden it's going against our own will because if I drink this glass of water, it's got to come out, it's going to hurt. So then we have to sort of redo the fact that, yes, but you need fluids, otherwise you're going to die. So actually it messes with our ability to know what is true inside our body. Yeah.
And it can make us even more sensitive. So if you were to have an infection, you are particularly then, sensitized to that even more so. And that just compounds the situation even more so. Yes, brilliant. So taste. No, we haven't done taste actually. Let's do taste.
Taste is an interesting one because it changes over time as well, doesn't it? So if you think about the little child who's 4 eating sprouts on Christmas Day and really wants to go and be sick instead, and you think, well, why can an 80-year-old eat a sprout but a 4-year-old can't? Our taste changes. It actually reduces. So what is strong to us as a 4-year-old becomes weaker as we get older. My granddad would eat a super hot curry and add extra curry powder because he was born in India, raised in India. For him, a hot curry, what's this mild stuff? For me, if I have a curry, it might have an asthma attack, actually. So it does have a specific trigger for me personally. But it has a reaction. Then I have a bit of an aversion to a curry because I think, well, if it's too hot, I'm going to have an issue. But the taste of the curry reminds me of my granddad, because it triggers a memory because it's it's all connected. So yes, taste is an interesting one because it changes over time as well. So what we're okay with one day, we might not be okay with another day. So if you're struggling with your taste senses. Actually, your problems might be that you don't like the food that you've got to eat, or you might associate it with something else, or things that are strong are super, super strong. Or perhaps even conversely, you may not be able to properly assume that really hot drink is actually as hot as it is. So you end up causing scalding or burning in your mouth because you can't associate heat with danger.
Absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
And it's just, and those who will add more spice because it's so bland that unless they have it really spicy, that they don't perceive that it tastes, and they have no pleasure whatsoever in food. Or there are those that are really hypersensitive to any form of extra spice or taste or sweetness or anything. So this is good. So was it taste, smell, touch, vision? Done proprioception, vestibular.
I've forgotten already. I don't retain information short term very well. I never ever have. I used to be the leader of a music group in a church, and we would practice on a Thursday. I do an introduction to a song, and we practice it an hour later. I've forgotten it. I've never ever retained immediate information. Vestibular. No, I've forgotten. It's gone.
Okay, so let's think of vestibular. So vestibular is in the inner ear. Yes. Vestibular is about gravity. It affects our muscle tone. The vestibular system actually affects our coordination, like with using two sides of the body together, because we need both sides to be integrated, and they go through the corpus callosum and other things in the brain to actually enable bilateral coordination. So if the vestibular is doing those kind of things and helps us know about gravity and which way up we are and which way we're moving, what might be, I mean, you did give the example before that someone would stand up and maybe fall over, but you're not allowed that one again. You have to pick a new one.
Right. I think of a child that we used to work with who had a real difficulty sitting still and concentrating. So the parent brought, I forgot the name of the thing, but it was like a little balance board ball thing they sit on, and they could kind of rock as they sat. And in doing that, it worked their vestibular system so that they could actually sit and listen to what we were doing. And then they were great.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, fidgeting is a massive one for, if it's not the proprioceptive system, then it's the vestibular system, because of the need for movement to help them to stay still, ironically. So those little wobble cushions, they're great. Can be, anyway, if we get it with the right child. There are some children who we think it's a vestibular issue, or people think it's a vestibular issue and think, they need to wobble more. But no, actually, putting them on an unstable surface makes it worse, because it's coming from their proprioceptors that they don't have that, they don't have the core strength just to hold themselves well. So putting them on an unstable surface just makes it 10 times worse. So, there's a time and a place. And we've done interoception as well. I think we may have done all our senses.
Yay, that was fun in a sort of slightly stressy way. Have I really recalled this information?
Do you want one last one or not? Have you had?
Let's do a last one. No, it's fine. I never did well at exams. I never did well at that sort of stuff. If it was practical, I was okay. So I did my truck driving test, and I was okay. Really, I quite enjoyed those. I mean, it's stressful in a different way, but retaining short-term information has always been something I've been awful at.
Oh, you did really well there, though.
Thank you.
The last one is the basics. There are three main areas. Now, this may well tax you, and it might be more the fact that I was quite happy to fill on the gaps in this one. There are three main types of sensory processing issues, which again can get broken down into other subcategories and this, that. Can you remember at all the different types, the different kind of presentations of what that might look like?
The first one I think of is movement, the ability to know where you are within time and space, the ability to do so safely and appropriately. So I would say movement would be one of those. Yeah,
we would call that a sensory-based motor issue.
Cool. I think yours sounds a little bit more fancy than mine. So movement's one. So there's three.
There's three. Mm-hmm.
Right. What's the next one? I would say the ability to function internally with like a healthy internal sensory net, or whatever that might be described as.
It would present itself. I'll just extend this one a little bit for you. It would extend it in as much as you have to pick out the detail of what is going on inside you or outside of you, so that if you happened to be falling over, that you would be able to discriminate, you would be able to perceive. So it's about perception and discrimination. You'd be able to perceive which way you're falling to then know how to put your hand out for you. Or you would be listening to something and you would be able to pick out the tuba versus the clarinet because you're able to perceive the differences and discriminate those differences between instruments. Or if you're reading something, you can tell the difference between a B and a P and a D just by the way that the sticks go when you're writing those letters. So then it is about, obviously how we are sensing things, but what we perceive about those signals that we're getting. And there is one last one.
One last one. You see, I would say it was to do with kind of the senses of what we feel and how we interact with other people. But that's probably not right.
That I'll just stretch it a little bit. It's about, can we respond to those sensations appropriately in a balanced way? Because if we're talking about the area of modulation, and if someone is quite overreactive in those senses, so this is about if you're overreactive or if you're underreactive, which does really have an interplay into how we relate to other people. Because if someone comes up and just brushes you lightly or gives you a gentle stroke, and you have an overreactive sensation, you'll turn around and hit them, or you'll be put on alert. You'll totally lose focus, attention. So it's much more about, you can't respond in an appropriate manner to that sensory input. So it's the last one's really how well we respond in a behavioral manner to them. The perception is much more about, picking out the detail, but we're unlikely to have a behavioral response. It's not really going to affect other people that much. It's just not going to be great for us because we can't perceive what's going on so well. Our clumsiness, our coordination issues, they affect both us and other people, but it's not on an emotional, personal level. Modulation is, because if we don't like the taste, the sound, the smell, we'll be really stubborn. We might be quite controlling, or completely, just not really with it at all, because we're just not registering that information. So
that makes me think of a horse, because whenever I've seen any vet go towards a horse, they always start at the eyes, put the hand on the head, and then they keep the hand on the body as they go towards the back of the horse. So the horse can then know that that same person is here, rather than walking up, touching the back of the horse and getting kicked in the head. And that's what I've seen vets do. I've seen people who are into equestrian stuff do, whatever the right word is. And I sort of equate it something like that, because it's the idea of, if you can't see something and it touches something sensitive and you're going to react to that, and you can react to that, then actually you're going to react to that. So if you can desensitize, which is, yes, I'm here, Mr. Horse, and off you go down the, holding put your hand on the horse going down. When you get to the back of the body, it's still got that same continuation of touch. Therefore, we know what's going on, rather than just walking up, touching a horse and getting kicked.
Yeah, spot on. Absolutely. And that's it. Children, do not approach them. If you're coming, if you're a teacher in the classroom, it's very often that they come from behind. If they're walking around the classroom, it's just like, for some of our sensory children, let's move the child. So you're not going to do that, because otherwise they'll, they're not going to turn around and kick you mostly, but they will react, and it will make them react internally if they are, touched unexpectedly.
We can understand jumping, can't we? If someone scares us and we jump, it's sort of, we can, I guess, logically think, well, that makes sense. We are startled, we have fear, flight, we jump, and it's a way of protecting ourselves. But all we're doing is saying that somebody has that sensation, only you haven't got to startle them, and it won't just be a jump. It could be a much more extreme input and output. And that, I suppose, would make sense to me. Good.
It's always good when it makes sense. It's like, done my job.
This has been fun, actually. I do love learning. I sometimes I write stuff down or take notes or whatever, and it just it goes into my head. But it's nice I remembered quite a bit, because I do try not just to talk to people. I try to learn at the same time.
Yeah, because you're always, what's so good is that you're always taking the information and you're always applying it either to someone that you knew or a situation, or you're talking about it as your family afterwards. And that's lovely. Yeah.
I like to try and apply knowledge because it helps me to understand. And I figure there must be somebody else with an interesting brain like mine who works in the same way. Right. I have one question off the back of all that, which occurred to me. How do you, as somebody who is presented with, let's try and think of a really bad stereotype. My child is just naughty, they're fidgety, the teachers are fed up of them, they won't sit still, they won't learn, what's wrong with them? How do you go from that kind of confrontation? I've had that as working with children where the parent comes in and my child's doing this, and you have to try and discern through the pain what's actually going on. How do you do that? Because I when I worked in churches with children, I don't have some of the complications that you're then presented with, which is much more complicated. How do you then discern and work through to this child is not being naughty? No, they're not just fidgeting. Actually, they have a sensory issue which we can correct.
Well, that's why I created the sensory super system. It was that simple, because it was just like seeing these things and being it's really hard for me. Most of my work when I'm actually doing face-to-face work is with children, and I am going into the 12/13 schools I'm going into. And it's really hard when I am faced time and time and time again with these challenging, naughty behaviors. And it's like, oh, crumbs, how can I help you see that there could be a different route, and there is a process by which we can assess that, assess those needs, because it's quite clear when you actually when you know what to look for, then it's quite straightforward going through the process. The interpretation and the treatment and the management, that gets more complicated. But anybody can do the assessment if they know what it is they need to be looking for from a sensory perspective. And that is the core part. That's the first part. I spend the whole month, if not 2 months to 3 months, getting a really decent assessment of helping equip people and teach them what it is you need to look for, so that we know within those first few months whether there is anything, or if somebody wants to do it full weekend, you can just learn it all in a weekend. But you have to know what to look for. And that is that's why I've developed what I've developed, because I want people to be able to see and be able to identify, could this be a sensory issue or not? And if it's not, brilliant. Actually, I'm working on a screening tool at the moment, to be honest, that hopefully will go up in the website shortly, to be able to say, look, do we think, is there enough of a cluster of behaviours for this to be a sensory issue? If not, then it's probably, some behaviour that needs to be looked at, some trauma, some emotional stuff, or, all of that, or parenting, or just needs a different approach. But there are specific things that we can look at, and that really is why I developed, the sensory super system, so that we can do a really good assessment. And then we know if we're dealing with sensory issues, we will pick it up in the assessment. And if we're not, we're not, in which case you go and see somebody else, because I won't be able to help you.
I suppose it's a bit like the difference between, as a parent, being alarmed by what you're seeing, rushing to the hospital with your child because they've got a runny nose. And you're thinking, oh, I've Googled it, I know what this is. And you run to hospital and the doctor says they've got a cold. Go home. But we misinterpret, because we have some information, which you've just demonstrated with me in the last 30 minutes. I have some information about sensory health, but of course a little knowledge can be helpful, and it can be dangerous if we then fervently apply, I know what I'm talking about. I would never ever say I know about sensory health beyond ask Anne. But I have learned some things, which is helpful. So hence my question, how do you deal with somebody when they come in and it's like, my child is fidgety, the teacher said they're terrible, what do you do? But that's when we need a specialist who can come along and say, like you said, maybe it isn't just naughty behaviour. Actually, what you're seeing as naughty, I can see a cluster of things that says it's not naughty, it's an inability to process movement or sight or sounds. Actually, they've got a problem with other things, but that's where we need people like you who can, not like me, can see properly what's really, really going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love what I do.
Yeah, and it comes out, and I think I've learned something through that, which is great. I hope. I didn't do too bad, did I?
Yeah, you did amazingly. I was so good. Every 6 months, well, maybe it's just like, if we keep these conversations going, it's just like, well, do that next year, and everybody's like, oh, Andy, you're so hot. You should retrain.
Possibly not. Needed occupational therapist specialists. Right. Thank you, Anne. If you want to know more about Anne Laure Jackson and how she can help you, don't ask me, ask Anne, because she's the specialist. I'm not. I'm just a bearded bloke who asks her questions and enjoys hearing her answers. If you go to our website, pure247radio.org/ALJ, that will link you up with Anne, so you can access all the stuff that she has on her website. Thank you, Anne. Next week, we'll go back to normal, and I'll have some questions for you.
No, that's great. Thank you, Andy. That was good fun. Thank you.
Thank you.